Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this hearing. It's something that needed to be and still needs to be aired out, and I find myself in one of those conflicting pieces of real estate that is very much impacted by the GPS guidance of our farm equipment, and also can use a little more broadband. But I wanted to direct my first question to Mr. Green, and that is the impact on precision farm equipment GPS guidance. And as that was developed, I don't know how many years ago we're talking about, perhaps 10 years or so ago, as it was putting in place, do you have knowledge of any efforts that were made to look at the spectrum then? And do you have the basis by which the decisions were made to build out the ag guidance technology on that spectrum?
Yes, I'd be happy to address that issue. The agricultural industry looked at that kind of spectrum back in the, I believe it was around the late 90s, early 2000s area. And one of the things that I've gotten from several manufacturers of GPS is that they were actually asked to have their spectrum in that area be movable, if you will. So if the company called Skyterra at the time would like to go and change the OmniStar megahertz signal that it was operating it on, the company could go and move it from one side of the spectrum to the other side of the spectrum.
Okay, and your perspective on this is that the spectrum that's been purchased by LightSquared, you disagree, I think, to where the overlap might be. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, that's correct.
And if a decision were made then on where that bright line might be rather than where that gray line might be, how would you respond to this? And that would be that if a company or an entity purchases spectrum, that they have a complete and full legal right to that spectrum, aside from the definition of where that bright line versus gray line might be. Would you agree with that? Mr. Green?
Yes.
Thank you. And then, so if there's to be mitigation of this problem that I sure hope does get resolved, and the testimony that's been here in the dialogue about the filter, that at least presumably and can resolve this, what's your position on which side of this spectrum should pay for that technology? Which side of this argument should pay for that technology?
There is an old interference phrase that goes across the regular wireless network, first come, first serve. And basically when you go and put a new frequency up on a tower, if your frequency interferes with somebody else, then you have to go ahead and remove your equipment or find an alternative way in order to resolve the issue.
But provided you own that spectrum, as you've said earlier.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And so aside from that, I mean, I guess I'll say even with that argument, let's just say that some entity has the authority to make this decision clearly, and they draw a bright line. And that bright line is someplace along the line where some of this GPS equipment that I want to keep operating, I want to solve this problem in the worst way. If that finds itself on a spectrum that is as clearly and legally determined to be LightSquared's, then you would say from a legal perspective, it's up to then the ag industry to take care of the cost of the filtration.
Well, I would say there's no clear-cut line in this. Like the other couple gentlemen were saying, is that frequencies have a tendency to go and bleed together. And testing out that interference and checking to see what is available is what the real key is. Now,
so you would say you would apply the first come, first serve to that area.
That's correct.
And I'm running out of time, so I didn't want to spend it all focused on you, Mr. Green, but I appreciate that. And I wanted to turn then to Mr. Carlisle, who's listening to all of this dialogue, and ask the opposite side, the 180-degree opposite of these questions. If the shoe's on the other foot, if it's determined in a clear way that the GPS people are there with a spectrum that they have a claim to, whether it's a gray area or a bleed over or a first come, first serve, who then would you say should pay for the filtration? And you, I think you've testified, I'm going to guess this, that this problem can technologically be solved. Doesn't it sort then down to who writes the check to solve it?
That's exactly right. And what I would say is if this were a case of our transmitter bleeding across into GPS spectrum, into the spectrum that they are using, that is federal government spectrum, by the way, that is used by the GPS manufacturers at no cost. If we are bleeding over there, then that would be our responsibility to solve. And we spent $9 million developing the filters to solve that. There's a chart at the back of my testimony that shows this. If the question, though, are their receivers looking into our band, there is no principle of first come, first serve recognized in the law. Certainly not in FCC regulations. FCC allows you to build any kind of receiver you want, but you have to take the risk if you are looking outside your band, and if you have the effect of blocking authorized services, you have no claim to protection. And by the way, this is recognized in the user manuals of many GPS devices. I've got an excerpt here from a Garmin G900X Integrated Cockpit GPS Navigation Device Manual, which says this device complies with Part 15 of the FCC rules, the rule I just mentioned. Operation is subject to the following two conditions. The device may not cause harmful interference, and this device must accept any interference received, including interference that may cause undesired operation.
I appreciate that acknowledgment. I just conclude with this question. Is either side of this argument looking for the taxpayers to pay the difference?
Absolutely not.
No.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that, and I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I yield back.